Welcome to Reduce Your Stress with Tim Ringgold. I'm a board-certified music therapist, author, and expert on how to use music to relieve stress fast. This podcast is sponsored by McConnell Music Therapy Services, Inc., where they believe in the power of music to transform people and communities. Based in Northern California, their board-certified music therapists support people of all ages and abilities within hospitals, schools, corporations, and communities using music experience to connect, express, and de-stress. Visit them at mcconnellmts.com or their Facebook page, McConnell Music Therapy. This episode of Reduce Your Stress with Tim Ringgold is also sponsored by Dr. Nisi, trainer and certifier of master and executive coaches, because she believes every person, every relationship, every business, and your finances should be extraordinary. Find out more about Dr. Nisi Moore and the Life Coaching Institute at www.drnisi.com. That's DRNEECIE.com. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Reduce Your Stress with Tim Ringgold. It's so great to be with you, and I'm so glad you're here. Today I'm interviewing Listening to Smile founder Ian Morris. Ian has over 21 years experience in the performing arts field and has made it his life's goal to use his gifts and passion to be of service to people in search of healing. As a multi-instrumentalist, he instinctively sought solace in music himself. It was during this time of very poor health that Ian came across information about the sacred healing potentials of sound and vibration and began to study further. He began creating and producing compositions of tones and frequencies, which led him to personally reclaim his health. In addition to this personal physical healing, he was seeing a drastic healing of his dyslexia. Within 2 weeks, he was finding more clarity, focus, and his ability to retain information became easier. Within a year, his physical health condition and his dyslexia were completely transformed. After seeing the amazing results, Ian wanted to go deeper into the healing power of sound, which led him down the path of holistic options paired with mindfulness techniques. His healing method quickly grew into the beginning stages for his company, Listening to Smile, which he founded in November of 2016. Today, Listening to Smile is international. Ian runs Listening to Smile with his partner, Dana Cato, where they are growing awareness for sound healing and working as true pioneers in the field. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this tender and inspiring conversation about healing oneself and others with music. And I'll see you on the other side. Ian Morris, welcome to the pod. It's so great to have you, brother.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited you're here too. So on this podcast, as you know, there's a lot of musicians out there who are in it for entertainment, a lot of them who are out there to educate. And then there's this band of brothers and sisters of us who are out there to heal. And it's a seemingly much smaller subset of musicians, right? So today I want to kind of take our listeners through your journey of how you discovered music, what that turning point, since most of us discover it through education or entertainment, what that turning point was where suddenly this was a modality, right? A tool, healing tool. And then I want to dive into your program with Listening to Smile, because it's unlike anything I've ever come across. So where, without going too detailed, take us back to the beginning for you. Where were you first introduced to music?
Yeah, so I was really lucky. My dad was a musician, and he had a wide variety of taste in music. And so I was exposed to so much music. When my dad passed away in 2001, I got about 2,500 vinyl records, that he left me, and about 20, it was around 22, 23 instruments, that he gave to me. And so, it was really just the exposure was off the chart. So like everything, listening growing up to like Appalachian music, to John Coltrane, Miles Davis, and he exposed me to like Tower of Power, Little Feat, Steely Dan, James Taylor, the Beatles, just everything that you can think of, John Luke Ponty, Frank Zappa, all these amazing artists that were just so broad spectrum. So I basically, from the time I was born until a teenager was in school, dad would just be like, check this album out, check this album out. It was just constant, he would be
Wow.
buying new music all the time and exposing me to, so that was really the first, just I was born into it and was very lucky to have a father that was into music so much.
When do you think back when you're a kid, if you can, to like, how old do you think you were before like you had like a this is cool moment where like
Mhm.
you were into the thing you were just experiencing and not just because it was your dad like foisting it on you?
Yeah, I think it was the first high school party I went to, right? It was so there was pictures of him putting guitars on me when I was like 8 years old, and I
Uh-huh.
wish I would have learned to play back then,
Right.
but
Sure.
I was into sports and it just wasn't cool to me. So I it was in high school. I think I was in ninth grade, 10th grade. I went to a party, there was a band playing, and I saw the response of the crowd to the band. And I was like, I want to be doing what they're doing. I was like, I love how they're affecting people. I love how they look like they're having so much fun. And it was a powerful experience, like I had never, that was really the first time I saw like a live band play.
Mm.
I wasn't even playing music, then. So I immediately went home and I said, Dad, can you teach me the bass? And he was like, yes, let's do this. So he started teaching me bass, and within maybe 4 weeks to a month, around that time, I was like, I want to do guitar. But I was like, so I think the first song he taught me was a Nirvana song, because it was just real simple. And
Yep.
he was like kind of criticizing the music, like there's better music than this. And so like the second song, he's like, I'll teach you the song, you teach me, and then you learn one of the songs I want you to learn. And the second song that he taught me was Blackbirds by the Beatles, which
Oh,
was insanely hard for me.
yes,
But
that's
he just
tough.
it is really tough, but he just kept sitting with me for like 2 weeks. I think it took me like 2 weeks to get that down. And then he was just like, you have to stick with this. Like, you're naturally picking this up. And then from there, I just started learning my own songs and really got into a bunch of um, guitar music.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
How cool that must have been for your dad to like, I'm thinking as a dad myself, like your kid comes home and is
Mhm.
like, Dad, teach me bass. Like, thank you at last.
Yeah,
All
my
those
mom
years.
jokes about it. Yeah, she jokes about it that he was just like so excited when I finally, gave in to the
This is
dark side.
cool. What is
Yeah.
chicks are screaming? What is
Mm.
going on? Guys are high-fiving. Like, I want some of that. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Mhm.
I totally relate to that. That's how very similar to me with guitar. I was a vocalist and was in choir, but there was no cool factor. And I went to a new high school in a new town, and it was like a private high school where people came from all different towns to this new high school. And it was kind of like you're starting over in who,
Yeah.
and your identity. And I wanted to be able to accompany myself. And, piano, I can't take piano to a party. So, and parties were like, parking lots where everybody parked their cars and listened to music. That was like the parties where I was. So it was like you could have a guitar in the back, you could open up your trunk, and you could bust out your guitar and sit there on the bumper, and you could start to play songs and sing them, and people would all come gather and call out songs. And that cool factor was
Yeah.
just, I mean, it was irresistible.
Mhm.
I can't pretend to say it was not really important to me socially as a teenager to find my place in
Right.
this new world. And so I totally get that. That's really funny. And I also grew up as an athlete. So very similarly, like I'm busy playing sports. I don't want to be inside practicing, yawn.
Yeah.
My parents, sat me down on a piano when I was like 8, and I was not having it, just
Yeah.
not having it. Please let me put on my baseball glove and go outside and ride my BMX bike till dinner time. Just get me out of this house and get me off this piano bench. So totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then so you discover guitar
Mhm.
and now you're like playing music and you're like, this is cool. And you're in high school.
Yeah.
So like cool is
Mhm.
everything. Kind of like when does music move from just being cool and entertainment to like this new realm of like, oh, this can really make a difference in my life, or it made it, there was this moment in your life that
Yeah. Yeah. So the first bands I played in were like punk and metal bands. I
awesome.
got into all that stuff. And,
Sure.
my parents were like, every time we would have band practice at my house, my parents would just be like, oh man, you can switch to some other music. But I remember having specifically this talk with my dad, and he was just like, it's not always going to be rock and roll. Right now, it feels like it. But he's like, you're gonna get older and you're gonna branch into other music. And I was like, no way, rock and roll forever. And it was like, and it was just so funny because I remember being about 35, 36, and then I had this conversation with my mom. I was like, Dad's right. I'm getting into classical and world music. I'm getting into, all these other different spectrums. And I started playing a lot of different world instruments. Like I play the yuchen. It's a Chinese instrument from the lute family,
Oh
and
wow.
all kinds of different instruments like that. Got into Native American flutes and all
Mm.
kinds of stuff that I never thought I would get into. But what ended up happening is I started teaching. And when I was teaching, um, a lot of the kids did not want to get into music theory. So you start with tab and then you try to kind of push them over to the other side. And what's interesting is I did the same thing my dad did with me. I was like, I'll teach you this Taylor Swift song, but I want you to learn this Beethoven song, right? And it was like, we'll do a simplified version, and it'll be fun. And so it kind of was like a give one, take one, for the team, and it just grew the interest. And so what I saw in the kids that we were working with in this program is their grades were improving, their outgoingness, their personalities like were changing. They were smiling a lot more. They were, you know, cutting up with each other more. They were interacting as a group more. And so as a musician, I knew there's benefits in music. Like, you can get that reprieve when you're, in angst mode as a youngster and you listen to metal and rock and punk rock and all that. And you're like, I feel so much better. You get out this aggression. But when I was working with the kids, you saw something deeper. It
Mm.
was, changing them emotionally, and their willingness and the ability to interact with each other changed on just a monumental level.
Mm.
And so when I saw that, I was like, there's something else here besides just entertainment or like soothing. This is like an emotional transition that's taking place. And so fast forward just a few years later, after I finished work with the nonprofit, I ended up getting sick and was diagnosed with MS and colon cancer. And during that time, I was a musician, and a teacher, and just didn't have insurance, for medical insurance. And this was 2010, 2011. It just caught me completely off guard. It wasn't a life plan. It wasn't something that was like working itself in. It just was like, bam, here it is. And so with that, there was a lot of debt that had to be settled with those bills and things, and the treatments they wanted to do. I didn't even have the finances to do the treatments. Some of the tests, just the tests that they were running, were like $4,500 for like one test. And it was just crazy. So I went home and I started really. I was like, I had this book and I started really diving into it, called The Healing Power of Sound by Dr. Mitchell Gaynor.
Mm.
And he was a traditional medical doctor that was treating cancer patients, who started really getting into the healing power of sound and wrote a book about it. So when I was reading that, it just led me to a spot where I was like, I'm a musician. I saw these changes take place with the kids that we were working with. I'm going to dive into this. What else I got to lose? So I started getting into meditation and working with breath work and music. And, just in the first 2 months, I had to kind of reframe what my idea of healing music was. I got into what you call like pure tones and binaural beats, which are just pure tones is just a note consistently played like a tone generator or a synthesizer, a sine wave, using one note, and you're basically meditating on that note. It's just one note that's played almost like a hearing test when you go and can you
Right.
hear this?
Just
Beep. Yeah,
beep.
yeah, yeah. And so I just started meditating with that. And at first it was very challenging because it's so boring, if you're
Right.
used to like listening to music. But when I started seeing the changes, it was about a weekend and about when I broke past the 10-minute mark, you would start hearing it was almost like the only way I can explain it is like an exploded parts diagram. It's like you're taking this note, and you see the signature, and then like after the week's worth of work consistently and about the 10-minute mark, it's just like the note explodes and I could hear all these variants and like overtones and undertones in the track. And so was very curious. I was like, am I doing this, with my
What's
this is
happening?
just so boring that
Right.
I'm like making this happen, or is this like a real thing? And so I was reading a lot of literature, and there was a lot of people explaining the same thing, that was taking place with them. So I was like so curious. I just dove in full force. And within the first year of doing the meditation and breath work and the music with headphones, like binaural beats and pure tones, I had lost about 120 pounds
Woo.
of weight. And I was about 300 pounds. I was overweight, went through a lot
Wow.
of depression and things. And yeah, so I lost the weight, and then I started seeing improvements in my dyslexia, and I started seeing improvements in my overall feelings, my wellness, my mental health was changing. And so it was so prevalent and just out in the open. When I would go see new people, that I hadn't seen in a while, they'd say like, dude, you lost a whole person. Like you seem happier. You're talking faster. You seem smarter. I don't know what's going on. And, I was just like, it's the frequencies, man. Like it was like so hard to try to explain it to someone that was just thinking you're a crazy person, but I
Now,
started,
I have to stop you just for a second, just so people can
okay.
truly appreciate the humor in that. Because I grew up in Connecticut and was from the tri-state area in New York, and then moved to Arizona, where there's like Sedona, and now live in Southern California, where there's Ojai and Encinitas and Esalen and San Francisco and Portland. And out here, you would hear someone say, it's the frequencies, man, right? Like that would be like a no brainer, like no surprise, but just enlighten the audience, like where geographically, where were you at the time?
Yeah, so that is a great point. So I was in upstate South Carolina and the low country, what they call the low country of South Carolina. And it's very backwoods. It was, with our nonprofit and everything, it was like going against the grain, very much so. And so, yeah, yeah, you're
So,
definitely right. It
so to
was
say
out of the
it's the
box.
frequencies, man,
Yeah,
in South Carolina, right, ladies and
yeah,
gentlemen, that is just like not in the cultural current of that area, right, regionally. So it must have been very challenging, except for the fact that the results were indisputable because you had lost an entire human.
yeah,
You were measurably speaking faster, clearer, more, coherently. So it wasn't like that those could be argued.
right.
So it must have been a very fascinating thing for people to really have to reconcile the two, even for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, it's still crazy because when we do events now, people will say, "So I can just listen to this music and it's going to do it." And I'm like, "Well, it's an interactive process, And I said, what that means is I can put on music, and if you're not paying attention at all, but if you tune into the music and you kind of set yourself up in the right environment, yes, I believe all you have to do is listen to the music." And so it was so hard for people to wrap their head around. But when they saw, like you said, the before and after pictures of me, and when they saw the changes in some of the family and friends that had come to these events and then
Mm.
encouraged them to come. So I think like even some of our testimonials that we have on video from clients, I think it's just all of that helps people to kind of wrap their head around it.
Yeah, and again,
Yeah.
it's because so many people are just so locked into the entertainment or educational context for music, and yet people have reached for music their whole life. to soothe them, to inspire them, to heal them, to get them through their darkest hours, and they'll candidly tell stories about that. And then you say, so do you see the connection? And then they have that kind of, I could have had a V8 moment. And it never gets old. Ian, I was presenting at a conference, over the summer. It was doctors and clinicians, and somebody puts in the chat, I just never put two and two together about the healing power of music. And I just sat there like, how did that elude you?
Mhm.
Like you've been using it your whole life, right? People prescribe themselves music all the time. That's what a playlist is, literally. It's prescribed music by you. It's self-curated, right? For a purpose. And it's just so interesting that we have to articulate that. It's what I've noticed is I feel like one of the things we are doing in our work is we are creating a new shape on the pegboard in their head, like a new context for music. Like we have to take the time to articulate. It's like we're drilling a new shape in their own consciousness around music for blank, and they may have been doing it, but they didn't consciously think about it. It was just something that was happening, and without, not under their awareness, but without their understanding. And now we're giving them the language, the science, the tools specifically to reach for it. And it's so exciting to watch because they're so empowered by it,
Yeah.
when they see results. It's really exciting. So you kind of, physician heal thyself, you have this experience,
Mhm.
and then people are noticing the experience, right? How do you then how do you connect the dots from you as patient and overcoming tremendous odds to your company?
Yeah. So one of the first things I did working on myself was I took a massage table, and I put a resonance chamber on it, and then put speakers, drilled them into the wood and put them to where they were playing the sound right onto so the whole tabletop became,
Yeah.
a resonant, and so I would lay on that.
Vibroacoustic bed.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
And so I just laid on that bed for a while. And the more that I would lay, first started at 30 minutes, and then it was an hour. And then I started sleeping on it, like just for the entire night. And I would wake up
Wow.
the next day and I would have this vibration that was just so powerful. And when I would talk about it to people, they would want to come over and experience it. And so
Sure.
I had friends, and it's honestly where the name Listening to Smile for the company came from. Was people, as soon as they would lay on the bed and I would turn it on, they would just start smiling because they would like, I can't believe this bed's making this much vibration. And so it was just so powerful to see that. And the more that I started hosting like meditations in my living room, and I started making the music, because a lot of the new agey music, I saw the benefit in the music when I was listening to it, but it just seemed so boring to me. And it was so
Mhm,
kind of cliche,
mhm,
like in
mhm.
a lot of so I wanted to experiment. How can I, as an artist, make my own unique kind of artsy interpretation of the music that's already out there, but
Yes.
incorporate the frequencies into it. And so I started sharing that with people in the living room, and then it grew into yoga studios, and it grew into wellness centers, and then we had churches and hospitals, and different people reach out and want to do it. And so then I started getting emails from people seeing some of our events on Facebook and things, saying, I want to use the music in over here in Australia, over here in China. And so I, as a musician who was just very tunnel vision focused on this community I was in, I was like, yeah, I don't have a program like that. And like it just kept happening over and over. And so I felt like God or the universe, however you want to look at it, was like, hey, I'm trying to help you out here, brother. Why don't you make an affiliate program and create a business around this and take care of yourself and take care of other people? And so, I was like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Let's do that. So it just kind of, unfolded into the business. It was never something that was really planned on my part.
Ah, brilliant.
But it just kind of took off from there.
Amazing. So we've used the word a couple of times now, frequencies.
Mhm.
And I want us to kind of talk about that a little bit because there's a phrase that you kind of is a cornerstone to your platform, which is frequency minded music. So what does that mean?
So frequency minded music means that we're working in tunings that would quote unquote be like alternate, tunings or concert pitch, however you want to look at it. But we're starting with a difference tuning, and then we tune all the instruments to that. And then when we're focusing on a track, the track that we're working on, we come up with the intention or focus. And then we use a note or a key to target that based on whatever scale or tuning that we're working with, so that the music is very rooted in frequency, and then the song is built on top of that. So it's where all of our music is using a binaural beat as a carrier frequency, and then what we call a mono beat or a pure tone is laid on top of that, creating a tritone. Not a tritone in a musical term, but just the three notes. And then that is the foundation of every track. And then we're layering the instrumentation on top of that and creating something.
Now, help our audience understand what binaural beats are, because that's also a phrase that, to the general consumer, they may have heard of it, they may not have heard of it, but they probably don't truly understand what that means.
Yeah. So binaural beat is basically two tones, and the benefit will be from using headphones when you're listening. Okay. And so the left speaker, let's say we put 100 hertz in, and the right speaker, we put 104 hertz in. So that difference in frequency.
And those are pitches?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So the hertz are panned hard left and hard right. So what ends up happening is in the brain, when you're listening to that, it creates almost a wobble, that kind of sound. Yep. And after a while, the brain does not like that disarray in it. So what it does is that it actually synchronizes the two hemispheres. The left and the right hemisphere are actually caused to synchronize. Right. And in that synchronization, you start hearing less of the wobble, and you hear the difference. And that's what the studies have shown, is that you're hearing the difference between the two frequencies. So if that difference in the 100, 104 will be the 4 hertz difference. Okay. So then the brain focuses on that 4 hertz, and then it actually steps down to mimic that 4 hertz because it's becoming such the focus. And what it does is it kind of shuts down the background noise and the things, people will say, sometimes I just feel like I'm sitting in the quiet of the storm. Like I can feel my normal overthinking and things that are coming up for me like in every day. But when I put on the headphones, it's like I'm observing it instead of being in like the victim of it, where I'm just like, I'm so cluttered and so anxious. And so it's like they're observing those feelings, but not like in them, you know what I mean? And so the binaural beat just really helps to facilitate new brainwave state. So like that 4 hertz would be a theta brainwave state. And so the theta pattern is what we hit just before REM sleep. Okay. And so we use the theta pattern quite a bit because a lot of hypnotherapists and a lot of life coaches like the theta pattern because it's a highly programmable state for the subconscious. And so a lot of the music that we do is theta, with that. And so it's just really the foundation, saying that frequency minded music means that our focus and intention is rooted in frequency, more than just entertainment or some catchy hook or something like that, right? So it's like really focusing on the frequency to be the healer, and the music is part of that, but the frequency being delivered from start to end is consistent.
Gotcha. That's really cool. So for, in music therapy, one of the things we're focused on is rhythmic entrainment, and we pay very close attention to tempo, as it influences the autonomic nervous system and can slow down or speed up the heart rate, blood pressure, respiratory rhythm at a subconscious level. And so very easy to manipulate the body with rhythm. And what I'm hearing you say is it's also for good. You use the word manipulate. You have to say for good, of course.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
But what I hear you saying is with binaural beats and the way that you build this frequency minded music is a way to, in a healthy way, kind of manipulate the brain to access brainwave states that are not our normal awake and alert state, but like a deeper state of relaxation, deeper state of, like you said, tapping the subconscious or unconscious. I like to think of consciousness as like a dimmer switch, not a light switch. And right. Most Westerners think of it as a light switch. You're either awake or asleep. Right. And like you'll even hear people say, "Oh, he's out like a light." But
Yeah.
really it's more like a dimmer switch,
Mhm.
and we can move up and down this kind of spectrum of consciousness, and as it pertains to brainwave states, because those brainwave
Yes.
states match those different types of consciousness, whether it's just kind of like the relaxed and aware state versus alert, and it's funny for the uninitiated. They're kind of like, well, I'm kind of in this like dreamy state, but I'm still awake.
Yes.
Yes, yes, you're
Yeah.
starting to understand the dimmer. That's the dimmer.
Yeah.
You've set the mood.
Mhm.
And it's hard for a lot of people because they don't know how to stop. If they just they'll fall asleep. Do you find with your listeners, do they go through a period of like what's the right word, like they're like, it's almost like exposure, there's like an exposure therapy amount of time before. So where I'm going with this is, the first time I was exposed to binaural beats, like I couldn't make it through the whole meditation. I would fall asleep. It
Mhm.
would just trigger sleep. And then I noticed the more and more my brain got used to it, the further and further into the meditation I would hear things. And in this one particular one, there was a script. So it was a guided meditation. And it was great because I knew the guy who wrote it. And
Yeah.
after like a month of listening to it, I was like, I didn't know there was this blah, 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 blah at the very end of it. I never heard it for like the first 3 weeks. And he laughed, he's like, yeah, most people don't. He's like, but that's
Mhm.
good for you. You stuck with it long enough to where your brain, kind of, what's the right word? Acclimated, and
Yeah.
you were able to drop into that relaxed state and then stay there. Do you have kind of experiences like that with your clients?
Yeah, totally. So a lot of people have a hard time just wrapping their head around the idea in general. Like, I'm just going to listen to this music
Totally.
and that's it. That's all I got to do. Like, it's funny. It's so, yes, totally. There's people who will write emails to us and say, I made it 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes into this track that's about 10 minutes long. And I was out and I did it for a month, where they just were falling asleep and they're saying it's working, it's helping me, but am I doing something wrong? And I said, no. I said, just like you, the more consistent that you stick with this, your brain will get used to it and you're going to go deeper. And you're exactly right. When we are laying out a track, the first things that we look at is frequency and the focus, and then we look at tempo. That's the next thing. And
Mm,
then after that, we even get into customizing the track. Is this going to be something that this person needs with more melody, or is
mhm,
this going to be more tonal in
mm.
properties where it's just creating almost like a drone
Yeah,
type of sound? And so we really try to customize the experience when we're working with clients one on one, so that we get the exact tempo. And uh, if we have real quick, I'll just say this about tempo. People always say, well, that's just so weird, just slowing the tempo down, that will slow my body down. And I said, well, think about a sporting event. You go to a sporting event, dun 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 dun. And I said, they're using tempo of music to hype you up and to get you excited. So this is just the opposite end of the spectrum, where we're using the music and the tempo to, really relax your body, target the stress response of the body, and then help you settle into a more subtle, relaxed, state. And we do that through, like you said, heart rate, lowering the body, kind of grounding and letting go, and then just also the tempo of, the heart rate changes, the brainwave states change. It's Tempo is a very powerful tool. So for
totally.
sure. Hmm.
That's really funny. It reminds me of I attended the World Series in 2001 when the Arizona Diamondbacks played the New York Yankees. I lived in Phoenix, Arizona, and got tickets to games 1 and 7. And in game 7, it was an epic World Series, first of all, but it was tied 3 games apiece, goes to game 7 in Arizona. When the Diamondbacks, when they would change and the Yankees would take the field and the Diamondbacks were coming up to bat, the music that they would play was like hard rock, heavy metal, and they blared it to get the crowd psyched up, to really give the batter as much energy as possible and to intimidate the pitcher as
Hmm.
much. And as a budding, I wasn't a music therapist yet, but as someone who was a skilled musician and someone who was already using music for therapeutic purposes, I could see what was happening. And I
Mhm.
found it quite fascinating, the psychology of sound and music and volume. And one of the things I found out later is that in one of the reasons rock concerts are so loud is that our brains will release more dopamine at higher decibels with the same music than at lower decibels. Nobody knows why, but for
Yeah.
some reason, the brain prefers, like, it releases more pleasure chemicals when the music's loud, even the same content.
Yeah.
So they were literally hyping everyone up, just like you said, they're hyping people up. And when you think about at a baseball game, it's dun, 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 dun,
Yeah.
dun, 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 and they're using tempo and pitch, and they're modulating both. And before you know it, and everyone's like, ah, it's really funny, and
Yeah. Yeah.
retailers play fast tempo music in their stores because it encourages foot traffic. Restaurants will play fast tempo music at lunch and slow tempo music at dinner because fast tempo music, people will chew faster and they will pay their bill faster. So at lunch, a restaurant needs to turn every table at least once, meaning they need that table needs two parties during the lunch hour in order for them to turn a profit. But at dinner, because of bottle service with wine and mixed drinks, they want people to linger. And so they want to slow down the dining experience. So they use slow tempo music during the dining experience. And so it's just fascinating, all of the ways in which we can use sound and the elements of sound and music to really influence the body and human behavior. One of the things I want to ask you about, as a musician, you are incredibly prolific because you have been creating monthly, like, albums of frequency minded music for going on 6 years now.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. So
insane.
yeah, there's 120 albums. And I was talking the other day. I think Zappa put out 100, and they're saying there's like 140 Frank Zappa albums, and that they still have enough in the vault to release one every year for like the next 60 years or something.
What?
Yeah, and one of the things I heard was that he actually recorded an album with Eric Clapton and Zappa. I couldn't
Oh,
even imagine
oh
that
my
that
God. Can you
combination,
imagine?
but
Right.
it's in the vault. I saw it on his new documentary that just came out. But anyways, long story short, I started out doing music where I wanted to, as a musician, it's really trying since Napster pretty much decimated the industry, and then the tech guys took over
Yep.
took over
DRM
everything.
yep.
Yeah, so one day I was having the conversation with people who were like, you should really take the music and make this into a company whenever, before the affiliate program. And I started thinking to myself, how can you create value? And I
Mm,
think the first thing why music is so not valuable right now is because of streaming services. And what
yep.
I mean by that is the streaming services, everything's out there at people's fingertips that they don't really have to pay for. So it's become kind of taken for granted, if you
Yep.
will. And there's a disconnect in so many things. So like the playlist, how we talk about playlists, the playlists are taking the artist name out of context from the listener. So like if I said, someone's like, oh, I love this playlist on Spotify, and I'm like, who's one of the bands on that playlist? I don't know.
Yep.
you know
Yep.
and so I think streaming is set up where the credit's not given, and it's just taken for granted because it's out there. So the first thing I did was create this monthly album structure, where I looked at the monthly astrology and I looked at the current events going on and created an playlist, from writing a playlist from scratch for the affiliates and the people who are working with our music, so that they could have something new and fresh to listen to and work with their clients each month. But I
Wow.
also started creating different genres and tempos and styles of music so that everyone had something each month to kind of grab
Mm,
onto.
okay.
Deep meditation tracks, things for sleep and anxiety, but also indie rock and post rock and trip hop and hip hop and shamanic drumming and just everything like that. So in a sense, it's like really becoming your own publishing house or record label, but also being the house band that's playing all these different styles of music and all these different instruments. So I play about 25 different instruments, and every month I challenge myself. And it's definitely been a blessing and a curse as a creator, because there's times where I'm in tears, like, why did I ever do this? Like, what was wrong with me? And like, and then I can't come up with anything new creatively. It's just impossible. I've already done 120 albums, and just that voice that's in your head. And so each month you're like, all right, we got to dig deep and come up with something good on this. And it just
Back to the well.
Yeah, exactly. It just challenges you to have to create on different instruments and all these different styles of music, something new and creative that gives them a little bit of what they want and why they're working with you, but enough that challenges them to go deeper and to expand as a listener. And I think that that's been one of the most challenging things that I've ever done in my life for this long. It's been definitely,
It's unbelievable when you so everybody, when you go to the website listeningtosmile.com, you can peruse all the albums, and you just scroll and scroll and scroll. And you're like, it's one thing to go to a podcast and you see like episodes and you scroll the episodes, but it's another thing to see an hour's worth of music, or and then every single album is this massive body of creative work, and what it takes to create a single song, much less an album. And then you see how many there are. It is impressive. Here's a funny question. It's probably similar. How do you struggle with coming up with album titles?
Yes. So just recently I have farmed that out to Dana, my partner. So it was definitely something, but I'll give you this. This is one of the most creative exercises. You can use it for song lyrics. You can use it for song titles or names of albums. This is an amazing thing. Okay. So you know who William Burroughs is? He wrote The Naked Lunch, kind of the cult classic.
Yes.
So William Burroughs came up with this thing called the cut up method, and I can go into the story if we have time, just real quick. Is it okay?
Go for it.
We got time. Okay, so basically William Burroughs there was an artist at this party, and he took a painting that he had gifted to someone at the house down and cut it up with an X-Acto knife. He was the painter of it, and he cut it up because he's like, this painting sucks, I'm going to redo it right here at the party. And so he cut up the painting, and then he glued it onto another canvas, painted it, and at the end of the party he hung it up, and he's like, this is good. So William Burroughs, the writer, was there at this party, and he said, well, if he can do that with a painting, I want to do that with all these unfinished poems that I have. So he just started cutting up the pages, and then he started like rearranging the words and lining them up in these weird combinations. So he came up with things like Heavy Metal Kid, Soft Machine, and it was things that you would never really think about pairing together, just kind of outlandish, titles. And so so basically when I was reading about this story, I said, I'm going to do this. And so I just got a bunch of books down off the bookshelf. I got a piece of paper, and then on the top left corner, I just drew a big circle, like a word palette. Instead of like an artist palette, it was like a word palette. And then I would just flip open a book, and the first page and the first letter, word that jumped out from the page, I just wrote it in my word palette. And so I started writing words till I had about 30 words in there. And then I just made a title up from the words, right?
Gotcha.
So the words would form a title, and then I would start writing the lyrics, the poetry, the song, whatever it was. And I just started finding that it was a way that it would get me out of the way. I wouldn't overthink the creativity process, and it was just a way that you could come up with the most unique and original names just very quickly. And so I've shared this with a lot of my musician friends, and they're like, dude, this is the best, like they get into it so much. And so it's a lot of fun. And I think writers really kind of like song lyrics and poetry and things of that nature, it just really is something that kind of unlocks creativity really quickly. So so basically the album titles would come from just sessions like that, or that would come from being in meditation, and I'm just like, I've got the title right now, I know what I want to call this. So it was just various ways, but it was definitely challenging to match it up sometimes.
So when do you sleep?
So about 24 to 25 days of the month I'm recording in the studio. because this is the funny thing is I have a bunch of side projects. So not only have I done the 120 albums with Listening to Smile, but I have one project that has 10 albums and another I have about 4 other projects over the last 10 years that I've done at least 5 to 10 albums in those. And then I
Wow.
also work with all of our affiliates. We have over 200 affiliates worldwide, and people do custom music. So they'll say, I need some custom tracks. So I just recently got 2 musicians who started working with me, and they're helping. But yeah, so it's a constant, you're in the kitchen cooking up the beats.
Yes, yes, which is a great place to be.
Yeah, it's
I-
fun, definitely.
yeah, there's I found in my life there's 3 places where time becomes my enemy, not because it drags, but because it goes too fast.
Yeah.
So the stage, the studio, and the field or court. Like, because I'm an athlete and an artist. So
Hmm.
whatever the sport is I'm playing, when I'm in the game, the clock disappears, right? If I'm on stage, the clock disappears. If I'm in the studio, the clock disappears. And that's when I know, like, apparently this was what I was here to do. Like I'm so at this stage of the journey, I'm so clear that those are the 3 places that I need to spend the most amount of my time and just organize everything else so that I can. And you've done a phenomenal job of being able to organize yourself so that you can spend just an amazing amount of time in the studio. That is really, really impressive. Kudos to, knowing what's bringing you joy and then organizing your life in such a way that you can be expressing yourself in that vein, in that way, in the maximum amount of time.
Yeah.
And not just for your own self-expression, but the ripple effect, as one of your albums is called, is all of the healing that occurs outward from that self-expression. And I think it's one of the things that people need to remember about creation is that as we express ourselves as creators for the purpose of self-expression, like just right there, let's just leave it right there, just like I am a creator and therefore the verb I need to create so that I may know myself as why I'm here. This is what I'm here to do. I need to create. So I am creating now for the sake of creating so that I may be and know myself as why I'm here. And then the rings that go out from there are massive and they're like latent, they're secondary,
Right.
but if you are creating from that place of self-expression, there is something so attractive, not physically, but like energetically. There's something so attractive when you're around people who are expressing themselves as creator. Like you just fall in love with their work. This is my
Yeah.
experience, at least. Like
Hmm.
I have a friend of mine who's a fellow music therapist who's also a songwriter. Like I'm in love with my friend because where she centers herself in terms of as a creator, like she tunes in like you through meditation, gets really, really centered. Maria Stark is her name. She was interviewed on the pod also. And the work that comes out of her is just like energy, like it's like a magnet. It's just so attractive because it's coming from this, I don't want to call it pure, like don't get that wrong with morality, but just this like
Yeah.
pure tone, like you said, right? There's no other noise. It's just really clean. Something beautiful about that. And I think that's the results speak for themselves. Our guest last month, Barry Goldstein, is a producer also of very intentional, very intentional healing music. And he's the same way. He's like, I have to be careful, like when I walk into the studio, like what energy is in my fingers when I touch the control board.
Yeah.
Who else is in the room? Like, do I have an
Mhm.
engineer and where's their head at? Because
Yeah.
their energy is, it's going into this track. And he just had a number 1 track. It was on number 1 on Amazon on all categories. And it was
Mhm.
guided meditation.
Yeah.
And it was number 1. And it was like, because they were so intentional about creating from a very, very specific intentional place. And that's just what a great place to be able to spend your time. So, dude, your journey is so ridiculously inspiring. It is.
Oh,
It's unbelievable. So
Thanks,
happy
man.
to know you. So happy to be able to share you. So where do people go to learn more?
So listeningtosmile.com. And we have a lot of information on there, in the menu section, where people can learn some info about frequency minded music. And there's some videos on the homepage there that are, I think, 2-3 minutes long, that people can watch to find out a little bit more. And you can directly contact us on there. There's a phone number, an email address, or they can reach out if they have any questions. And we help people quite frequently if they say, where do I start? What album do I start with? And we help them get started on that journey. So yeah, that would be the fastest connecting point.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Well, Ian, thank you so much for sharing your story, your expertise, and your passion with our listeners today.
Thank you so much, man, for having me.
You bet.
Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. See ya.
Bye.
Thanks so much for checking out this episode of Reduce Your Stress with Tim Ringgold. I've got a couple of resources for you, which you can find in the show notes or you can listen to right here. So check it out. If you enjoy the sound of my voice and you enjoy the sound of my guitar, imagine them put together. Go to sonicrecovery.com and take your very own relaxation vacation, where I take you out of the stress of the present moment and back in time to a time when you felt happy, healthy, safe, and sober, and then walk you through that memory so you can bring back those feelings into the challenges you're facing today. So go check that out. It's at sonicrecovery.com. If you're a healthcare worker in recovery, check out the Music in Recovery Self-Care Guide for healthcare professionals that I created just for you. That's at hcp.sonicrecovery.com. And if you're a healthcare worker and you'd like more information about how to help your patients use music, you can check out the Music Medicine Guide that I created just for you at musicmedicineguide.com. Lastly, if you enjoyed the pod and you haven't done it yet, would you just take a minute to rate and review it? It really only takes about 60 seconds, believe it or not, and it would go a long way to help us make more people know just how good this pod is, particularly for healthcare workers and their stress. Thanks again. See you next time.